Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Sarah Montague. Georgia wants to join NATO. Its defence minister has been touring European Union countries, making the case for the former Soviet state to join the club of Western nations who vow to defend each other's borders. She is Thinathin, my guest today. But it was only a few months ago that Russia extended its control over South Ossetia and Abkhazia, which the United Nations still recognises as Georgian territory. So is NATO prepared to face up to Russia over Georgia? Thinathin, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you very much.
If NATO accepted Georgia, does that immediately drag it into a fight with Russia over your borders?
Well, there is a quick answer to this question and long answer to this question. Quick answer is I don't think so. I don't think that there is any reason to believe that Moscow is ready to engage in a war with NATO, even under the circumstances that we live today in today's Europe. I don't think it's going to happen. A long answer to this question is the history of NATO. Whenever NATO expanded, it has brought peace there. We don't have any examples of NATO expansion and then war or any kind of difficulties and security emerging in those countries. I always say that the only reason why today, for example, the Baltics feel safe and secure is not because Russia gave up its dream of expansion to its former republics once again, but it is because they've joined NATO. And there is no reason to believe that Georgia will be different.
You'll know, though, that Russia says that actually its concern, if Georgia joins NATO, is what Georgia does next. And Dr. Evgeny Burzhinsky, who was a spokesman for Russia's Ministry of Defence back in 2008, when Georgia was in war with Russia, has said recently if Georgia joined NATO tomorrow, in 2 days they would attack Abkhazia. We would respond, as we're obliged to by our agreements with Abkhazia. Then NATO would have to decide what to do.
Georgia is not planning to attack anybody. And from the quote you just gave to us...
But what would you do about Abkhazia? If you joined NATO, if NATO accepted Georgia as part of it, how would that change how you treat what you consider to be part of Georgia, Abkhazia and South Ossetia?
Abkhazia and South Ossetia are part of Georgia, and that will be like that forever for Georgians, and Georgians will try everything to gain back hearts and minds of Abkhaz and Ossetian people. That is the goal of, I believe, every government that is going to come in my country, and it certainly has been the goal of every government that was in my country. What we will do, exactly the same thing Germans did when half of Germany joined NATO and another half was still under the Soviet occupation. It's a long way to go, but it happens eventually without war and without actual fighting.
Okay, but
there is an experience, there is an example, and Georgia is ready to accept that challenge as well, as it was doing for all these years. We have never engaged ourselves into a war over either Abkhazia or South Ossetia.
So by becoming members of NATO, it wouldn't change the way you deal with the relationship between Abkhazia, South Ossetia and Russia?
Absolutely not. Georgia, once again, has never been initiating war against either South Ossetia or Abkhazia. Georgia's policy always was, and the current government's policy is very clear on that, of one, strategic patience, two, confidence building. It was not about grabbing territories.
You're saying it's hearts and minds. You have a problem, though, with NATO because there are mixed messages, one might say, not least from, we've heard from NATO's Deputy Secretary General, the Ambassador Alexander Vashbo, making the point earlier this year that your country will become a member of NATO provided that it meets all the necessary requirements. He said that in Georgia earlier this year. But we also have President Obama saying neither Ukraine or Georgia are currently on a path to NATO membership, and there's not been any immediate plans for expansion of NATO's membership. Who do you believe?
Well, I believe in Georgia, and that's what I believe in, and I believe in Europe, that, and the United States, obviously. I believe in NATO, that once said that it's all about the one united Europe in peace. If it is all about the same mission, then that's what I believe in. And Georgia is part of Europe, and Ukraine is part of Europe. And we talk about one united Europe in peace, then it cannot exclude Georgia or Ukraine or Moldova for that matter. Well, Moldova is not intending to join NATO, but when we talk about...
So irrespective of what President Obama says, or indeed of the French president in March this year, François Hollande, saying France's position is to turn down would-be members, we consider expanding NATO as not a priority at this time.
Well, those are the most important opinions and the most important statements, but we also remember statements from the end of the 90s when lots of countries were saying that there was no way Baltics joining NATO or European Union in a foreseeable future. And then overnight, basically, those opinions have changed and those decisions have changed. Not because somebody was wrong when they were making those decisions, but because the political situation was different. So we are absolutely sure that in today's changing world and today's changing Europe, particularly in our parts of the world, in our parts of the Europe, there is a lot for 1 year before we get to Warsaw Summit that will change. And there will be a window of opportunity for countries like Georgia to get on this path.
You say that Georgia is part of Europe, that you look at the history and countries that join NATO are safer. But look at the example of Ukraine, which partly as a result of closer ties with Europe and NATO, found itself in a difficult situation, which many people, even in the West, said that the Western approach was a provocation to Moscow, that it was no surprise that Moscow felt threatened and wanted to protect a country that it sees that it is emotionally tied to, in the same way, arguably, that it is with Georgia.
Well, before Ukraine, there was Georgia in 2008, and it was exactly the same thing when, unfortunately, at that time, Bucharest Summit did not manage to deliver on the promise that was given to Georgia as to granting Georgia a membership action plan for NATO. This is exactly what was understood by Moscow as an invitation for invasion into Georgia, and it actually happened in August. So we can take both examples. These are two countries where people are actually dying in wars with the European Union and NATO flags in their hands.
Can I just say, are you saying that Russia's approach in 2008, the incursions, the control of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and what has happened in Ukraine would not have happened if both were now part of NATO?
I'm 100% sure about that. I have no reason to believe otherwise. And also there are facts that prove my opinion being right. Once again, I've said it in the beginning, when you look at Baltics today, it's a fact and it's a proof. And
can you see how Russia would feel provoked, though, by the West coming into its backyard, coming into its neighbour, coming into a former Soviet state?
Russia is provoked by the mere fact of Georgia being an independent state. It's already there. Just the fact that Georgia is an independent state without the influence of Russia, with no control from Russia, is already a provocation for them. So there is an answer. Yeah, okay, we can forget about Georgia. We can forget about the whole story of 25 years of fight for independence and freedom, Euro-Atlantic path. That's not acceptable for us, but there might be people out there who might be thinking like that. We are going to fight this fight. We know it's our fight. I agree with Ambassador Vershbow, absolutely, that Georgia needs to make its homework more and more. We need to be straight-A students that we are trying to be, no doubt about all those things. But when we talk about NATO or European Union, for that matter, being provocative in any action whenever this action is towards Georgia or towards Ukraine, for that matter, I think it's very big misunderstanding or simplification of the situation.
Many people in Russia feel that whether it's Georgia or Ukraine, that it is part of their, I mean, the description by a former ambassador to Russia is it's as if they were having a limb amputated.
Well, again, that was exactly the same thinking towards any country that is bordering Russia and is member of NATO today. There is nothing else I can say.
And the West should just front up to that.
It's been like that always,
okay.
And it will be like that always. We just opened, together with Secretary General Stoltenberg, on 27th of August, JTAC, the Joint Training Center, Joint Center of NATO in Georgia. And immediately, like in the matter of 5 minutes, there was a press conference done by the MOD in Moscow saying that NATO opening a training center in Tbilisi is a provocation towards Moscow. Okay, we get it. We understand it. These are kinds of statements that they keep making, but it does not mean that we should stop.
Okay.
Georgia should stop, or Brussels should stop, or or any other capital for that matter.
But NATO doesn't seem to be, your love for NATO almost appears unrequited, because although they say things like, and Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, says NATO will continue to stand by Georgia, I wonder if you think that's good enough, whether you feel betrayed by them, because it's taken a long time to get to this point and there's no evidence it's going to get any closer.
It's good enough for a while. It was good enough for a while, but it's been 25 years, well, actually a little less, 21 years, that we've knocked first time on NATO doors, and that we were promised that if we perform well, if we do reforms, if we do X, Y, Z, then Georgia will become eventually a member of NATO. In 2008, at the Bucharest summit, that we were so much disappointed, there was still a big positive in it, because there is a communique which says very clearly, very nicely, that Georgia will become a member of NATO. That's the decision of 28. This decision stands as a decision, united decision of all the countries.
Okay, but look what's happening in Georgia. Do Georgians even care about this?
They
because
do.
You look at the polls and what has happened over the last few years. There was a poll carried out in April this year by the Caucasus Research Resource Centre, which showed that, yes, 65% of Georgians approved the goal of joining NATO. That was down from 72% last year. There seems to be a trend away. Similarly, there was an increase in support for the joining of the Russian-led Eurasian Economic Union.
No. Well, that's not technically true, because then after that the organization that conducted the research apologized itself that they made a mistake while making the interviews, mixing up European Union and Eurasian Union. That part is covered already, and they have apologized for it. As for the decline,
exactly.
As for the decline,
not as many people care about joining NATO.
That's not true. Well, first of all, 67%, I would say, is the highest of all times.
65% down from 72%.
All countries that have joined NATO in terms of enlargement. That's one. Two, it's not about people not caring about NATO. This is absolutely not true. And you can go through all the other questions. You will find the answers, and those answers are very clear that they do care about it. That's on top of their agenda.
But it's not on top of that. That's exactly the point.
But they are becoming frustrated. They are becoming disillusioned. They are becoming. They are not believing anymore that it's going to happen to their country. It's not about.
Okay, we'll come on to that. But it is absolutely not top of their agenda. Top of their agenda is unemployment and the economy. And of 21 issued polls, Georgians pick NATO and EU membership as the issues that the government spends too much time discussing. You're obsessed with it. The people are not.
No. Yes, people are worried about the jobs, no doubt about it. People are worried about the economy, about the agriculture, about where they sell their goods that they produce. But if there is war tomorrow in Georgia, all that will be forgotten, because people will be dying. And Georgians know the best than any other country in the world, because they've been in war for 25 years. In war for independence, in war for the democracy, in war for European Georgia, for Georgia more secure. And Georgians are the people out of any nation in the world who contributed the most in the international fight against the terror. Georgia stands as the country #1 per capita, still contributing troops to Afghanistan, and it's being one of the popular issues, and the popularity of this idea never decreasing. Why? Because this is who we are. Because we strongly believe that we belong to these parts of the world, and we need to be part of every single activity that matters for the world security.
But as time has gone on and Georgia has not got what it's want, you have people like Gia Nogia, who's a political scientist at Tbilisi Zilia State University, saying many Georgians see Europe as weak and indecisive, but Putin looks like a strong guy who's getting his way. So people think, what exactly are the benefits from Europe? Maybe it's silly to resist Russia so much. And you see that reflected, not least, in the support for political parties in Georgia.
No. We don't have any single political party in parliament today.
And in a year's time, at the elections then?
After NATO summit in Warsaw, which is right in the middle of our electoral campaign, because we are going to have elections October 2016, that makes Warsaw a big electoral issue. Maybe. If Warsaw fails to deliver, we might get pro-Russian political forces in parliament, very marginal.
They might enter parliament. Doesn't make it clear that Georgia can enter the alliance.
Well, it is made clear that Georgia enters alliance. It's already there, but we need a move on towards.
And if there isn't, you're saying that...
I'm saying that if it is not happening, then we will get pro-Russian political forces in parliament, with marginal numbers. This is at least what polls say at this moment, what we expect from the opinions that are around in a country, but very marginal. And it's a democracy. That's democracy. We do not, different from previous times, we do not prohibit any political parties in Georgia. Different from previous times, we do not put political opponents in prison like it was happening with the pro-Russian or Russian labels.
There is as you know, there is increasing support. And one of the interesting things...
No, I don't agree with that. There is not increasing support. There is increasing disillusion with Europe and NATO, which does not make Georgians supporting Russia. These are two completely different issues, and it's very important to differentiate. My generation, which is the main workforce in a country, voting population, right, the major parts of the voting population, this is a generation who seen Russian aggression itself. It's not that something we've read in history books and we've learned in schools. Every single family in Georgia has a member of the family who was killed during these 25 years by the Russian troops, by the Russian soldiers. There is no way. It's very simple. It's as simple as that. There will be no increasing support for Eurasian Union or Russia or for anything like that. But yes, there is increasing skepticism that Europe or NATO, for that matter, are ready to accept Georgia as part of its community. It is there. I'm not denying it. It's there. It's absolutely clear. You see it daily. But it does not mean that there is increase in support.
What do you think is going to happen if Georgia, given what is going on? Because even this year, a few months ago, we saw new deals being signed. What they mean on the ground in South Ossetia and Abkhazia is open to some dispute. But
you mean between Russia and...
Between Russia and South Ossetia and Abkhazia, there have been a closening, should we say? I mean, the suggestion that there is no borders between the two.
Absolutely.
On the face of it, looks as though Russia has moved its border, in fact, inside Georgian territory.
Yep, absolutely.
What is this leading towards? Is there a chance of a repeat of the 2008 war?
Well, just to add, to make it even more dramatic, what you've just described, it's not just the agreements that they've signed with, Russians signed with South Ossetia and Abkhazia. It's not just opening embassies on the territory of Georgia and Abkhazia and South Ossetia, having 6,000, almost 6,000 Russian soldiers on the ground on permanent basis, but it's also kidnapping of the people on the daily basis on ABL. It's moving.
What do you mean kidnapping of the people?
I mean kidnapping. I mean Georgian peasants going to the forest collecting mushrooms, being kidnapped by the Russian militaries. That's what I mean.
What, being taken by the disappearing? Are you saying
they are not disappearing. They are then released after 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, depending on
how often
what
does this
mood.
happen?
Almost every day.
Every day you're saying Russian soldiers are kidnapping
absolutely
people from within Georgia?
From within Georgia, ordinary peasants, ordinary people, ordinary citizens of Georgia.
To what end?
To saying that they are illegally crossing border. That's the accusation that they are getting there. And then it's a kind of administrative offense, and they are released after they pay fine or whatever is instituted there. On top of it, we have creeping annexation going on in a country on a daily basis. Again, you've mentioned this summer has been very difficult.
You talk about creeping annexation.
Absolutely. Where is it heading? It's heading towards, yes, maybe repetition of the 2008. Once again, it's not going to happen now. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But again, if the world shows weakness on Georgia, the same way as towards Ukraine, if it happens like that, if the world fails to accept the expansion of freedom, then we say, there are very simple sentences we can use here. Here are countries who say we want to be part of the free world. If you put an end to the freedom, if NATO says, this is where freedom ends, after that we don't care, then yes, it's going to happen.
You are effectively head of the military in your country. What are you going to do about it?
Can you do anything?
Yes. I mean, well, is there any, realistically, you're talking about Russia.
Yeah,
you effectively lost the war in 2008. Is there anything you can do about it?
Yeah, we will die as heroes. That's all we can do about it. But the question is more, is there anything the world can do about it? Because it's not Georgia's tragedy.
And the answer to that question?
And that's not Georgia's tragedy. It's not going to be just about Georgia. If Russia got away in 2008 in Georgia, and then we got Ukraine, And if Russia gets away with Ukraine today, and if there will be no deliverable from Europe and NATO, in this case NATO, in 2016 Warsaw Summit, if the NATO will not be absolutely clearly saying that we won't tolerate it, that there is no boundary to the freedom, and that we care about the partners,
are you being realistic?
then
Are you being realistic?
realistic.
The former US ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, says NATO will never invade Russia. I mean, what are you asking them to do realistically in terms of what it means on the ground?
Realistically, it's deterrence. It's not invading Russia. And I've said it from the beginning, and I'm going to repeat exactly the same thing. Whenever NATO expands, war is not happening there. It's a proven fact. Everything else that we are hearing is an assumption. In 2008, we were told if you are given an MAP, then there will be Russian invasion. So on that assumption, Georgia was refused and there was war. This is fact. This is what already happened. It's not my opinion or someone else's opinion.
But the reality
and Russia got it as an invitation.
Okay, but
and we say in 2016 is the same thing that's going to happen.
You have a bigger picture here where you have NATO country members who have effectively distracted by what is happening in Syria. Why should they start effectively picking another war or provoking Russia, as many would see, creating another difficulty for them when they have a far bigger headache with Syria?
No, Russia does not need to be provoked, first of all.
Sure,
and it was proven in Ukraine.
But they have a headache with Syria. Why are they going to take this problem on?
Second of all, Syria is it's a big problem. Refugee crisis is a big problem, but it's not the problem that is substituting another problem. There are lots of problems in today's world. When Afghanistan was seen as a problem, Georgians never said we have a problem and we don't care. We've sent the largest army in Afghanistan because we care.
You've made this point. I think you lost 30 soldiers.
Yeah, we did. And we are proud of every single of them. Because they were fighting for Georgia's cause exactly the same way as for your security. It's our security as well. We believe in that. And because there is a problem in Syria, or because there is a problem in, I don't know, anywhere else in the world, and because there is a migration problem, it does not mean that the people dying in Ukraine is go away. It does not mean that that Russia will stop war in Ukraine, right? It does not mean that. So the world needs to...
And on Syria, are you doing enough? Because there are those who say that Georgia is effectively a gateway to Syria. You don't have enough control over your borders to prevent people going into Turkey and onto Syria.
The same way as UK. Georgia does not have more soldiers in Syria than UK citizens are there. I mean, this is the problem of the world today.
It is a problem with people going, and Syria and Georgia certainly has. I mean, your former president, Mikhail Saakashvili, suggests that there are hundreds of Georgians, several hundred Georgian Syrians who've gone to fight with
my
so-called
former
State.
president says many things that are absolutely foolish. That's another story. But
So
I'm not going to recommend.
Wrong.
Of course, he's wrong on everything. Actually, what he says about Georgia, he says that
Is he wrong on everything? He says that if he goes back, one of the reasons he effectively gave up his citizenship is because he cannot go back because he'll be put in prison. That's true, isn't it?
There is an investigation against him. Whether he will be put in prison or not, I don't know. That's up to the courts. Saakashvili always felt that he was prosecutor, policeman and a judge at the same time. I'm neither prosecutor, nor policeman, nor the judge. So I cannot answer that question. I know that there is a criminal case against him.
And that criminal case, you will know that the likes of senior US senators, including John McCain, and the former EU Foreign Representative Catherine Ashton, have raised questions about that prosecution, saying the pursuit of justice Senator McCain saying the pursuit of justice should not become a tool of political retribution. It's a similar point that was made by NATO's Deputy Secretary General when he said even the perception of selective justice and politically motivated prosecutions must be avoided if you want to join NATO.
And I absolutely agree with every single word in that. Yes, I'm a lawyer. I'm a human rights lawyer by background, and anything that is related to selective justice or persecution for political reasons is absolutely
to charge your former president?
No, if someone committed crimes, then those crimes need to be investigated. If that investigation leads to concrete human being, that human being needs to be brought to justice. If that human being happens to be president or minister or whatever he was, it doesn't matter. Nobody stands above the justice. Nobody should stand above the law. There is a Strasbourg court decision, 2 already, which say very clearly that he was involved in certain criminal cases. Strasbourg court requested from Georgia to investigate those cases.
Tina Khidasheli, thank you for coming on HARDtalk.
Thank you very much. Thank you.